Thank you. All right, so this is a live streaming of the Everything Else. How many of you know the Everything Else here? Some of you do, some of you don't. You're going to be surprised. So the Everything Else is a podcast about core skills. I usually do this with my co-host, Vida, and she's not here today. So I think we can sort of invoke her spirit. So that I'm going to leave a chair open so that she can sit there. So before we start, we're going to be talking a little bit about imposter syndrome and language learning, right? How many of you speak a second language? It's interesting how some of you didn't even, it's like half raised. Why? Because maybe I don't feel that I speak that well. Do I speak a language? Does that qualify as speaking a language? So you guys have probably heard of imposter syndrome, right? Yeah? Does anyone want to explain or what they think an imposter syndrome is? Am I killing you with this, with the audio? No? Go on.
No, basically, I think that is when you don't feel qualified or you don't think that you are enough good for performing something or doing something. So basically, you underestimate you and you don't feel that you can do the things in the right way. But probably can be true or not. But I think that's the definition.
Everyone agree? Yes? Is this working? Yes. I changed everything. All right, so excellent. So what I want you to try and think of for a second is the last time, I mean, you know the definition. Have you felt that way? Yes. Has everyone at one point felt a little bit? So what I want you to try and think of is the last time that you felt a little bit of imposter syndrome. Yeah? I want you to try and picture the situation, and I want you to try, you don't have to share it. You can if you want to. I want you to think about where you were, what you were doing, what was the context, who else was there. Are you thinking? I can see some of you processing it. Who was there? What was the context? And how did you feel? How do you usually feel when you think you feel imposter syndrome?
Unsure.
All right.
Nervous.
Anxious. So when we think about these things, right, it's, as you said, we sort of underestimate the way that we can perform. And this can be sparked in any situation, right? What situations, in the situations that you were thinking about, were you speaking in your own language or were you speaking in a second language? Both? Both. Sometimes it could be a work situation that you know, and sometimes it can be a situation that is not, that makes it a little bit more difficult because it's like an added bonus, right? You already feel a little bit insecure and then you have to do it in your other language. Take a seat. So having imposter thoughts, when we talk about the syndrome, right, it's a variety of symptoms that we have. So having imposter thoughts, everyone has had imposter thoughts, right? I think when we talk about imposter syndrome now, we kind of throw it lightly, you know, like, I have imposter syndrome, and now everybody suddenly has imposter syndrome, right? So I think it's important, first of all, that we identify that just because I have imposter thoughts doesn't mean I actually have imposter syndrome, right? So I can feel insecure, anxious, and a little uncomfortable in some situations. And then in other situations, I can actually have full-on imposter syndrome, which makes it a little bit more difficult for me to perform in some cases, right? So today, we're going to be talking a little bit about how language learning can spark imposter syndromes. Okay? So I'm going to be calling some friends. You two want to join me? We're going to welcome with a huge clap Ale and Daryl. So You got it easy because now that I have two people sitting down, we're going to do it in English. So the imposter syndrome for today is only for Ale. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I gave you the fake one.
Talking about the impostor syndrome.
You don't even deserve a microphone. All right. So you said today when I asked in which situations you felt that your imposter syndrome was sparked, you said both.
Yeah.
Do you remember the last time that you felt it in related to language learning? You feel it when you speak Spanish?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Look, gringos also get imposter syndrome.
I was just at lunch and
It was just 2 seconds ago.
it was, honestly. And, we were sitting at a table and having a great conversation. And then at some point, it just started creeping in. I was like, I'm understanding half of this. Maybe I shouldn't contribute because I'm going to say something stupid. And then what will people think about me if I say something stupid? And it's the spiral, I think, that can happen. And I think that's ultimately why, when I said nervous, right? I think anxious was probably the better word for me.
It's everything at once, right? There is no one thing, right? Because it's the thought that sparks a whole load of feelings, and it might feel really different for somebody. When we talked about how it felt, a lot of times it also helps to see how it feels in your body, right? How does it feel in your body when you get it? When you feel that you feel the imposter syndrome creeping up on you? How does it feel in your body for you?
Like tense.
You get tense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get tired.
You get tired?
I get tired. I get tired. Yeah, tension, definitely, right? It's just a RuPaul, who has a TV show called RuPaul's Drag Race, and every season gives this speech about your inner saboteur.
Okay.
And
Does everybody know what a saboteur is? It comes from sabotage.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, and it's self-sabotage. Yeah, but I work in a primarily Spanish-speaking company as well, and so and I'm a leader in that company, and so I always worry that I'm communicating things appropriately, especially when Ali and I are talking about staffing projects and things like that. I need to make sure that she really understands, and generally she does, but I always worry about it.
You don't know.
I know.
Oh, we have a separate group chat for that.
Yeah, she's like, here comes Daryl.
So, but what does success look like for you in language learning, Ale? Because you were saying, I hope she understands and I understand. What does success look like for you in language learning?
For me, this is very personal. For me, is when I sometimes listen to people that speak a lot and uses a lot of words that I don't know. And phrasal verbs, why phrasal verbs? I hate them. And I get the context, I get the idea, and I realize that if I have to repeat all the words, I don't have a clue what it was said. But I have the concept, and I really understood. So my brain works alone. And for me, that is something, I don't know, very magic, because it's not unconscious.
When we talk about imposter syndrome in general, it's really important to analyze and to rethink your definition of success, right? Like when in general, not just language learning, but when we're talking about language learning, it really helps to say, okay, I got it, I understood in this case. What about you? Is your definition of success in language learning similar?
It is. It is, and with some nuances. Like for me, it's success when speaking a foreign language. For me, is when I feel like I can express myself genuinely. And I'm a very silly person, and so I'm always making jokes and all of this stuff, and it's very hard, I think, to develop a sense of humor in a second language. And so for me, when if I say a joke or say something in Spanish and people laugh, with me, not at me, That feels like success.
How do you know?
It's a great question. It's like reverse imposter syndrome. When you think you did a better job than you really did.
This is going really well.
I'm doing a great job.
All right. When was the first time, do you remember the first time that you had to publicly speak in your second language? Do you remember where it was? Did you have?
Publicly.
Yeah. Like today, you were part of a panel where you spoke English. Was that the first time, or have you done that before?
It's the first time, but I have some similar situation with demonstration for clients, for instance, or for boards or all the stuff that you have to defend and represent your team. And for me, it's kind of similar.
Yeah.
Because maybe there are a lot of things at stake because there are relationships more in a work level. So here is more, I feel some comfortable because it's our conference. I call it our conference. I know you guys, and I allow myself to make some other mistakes. But in this case, working is like, and you feel that everyone speaks better than you, and you want to speak excellently. And maybe if you don't feel this personal, when you listen to some native speaker speaking in Spanish, and they do a lot of mistakes, and it's fine for you, and you can communicate. But we are trying to speak better than that, and I don't know why we have that bar so high, because that is something that feeds the syndrome a lot.
That's a really
Because
great point.
you want it to be perfect,
Yeah.
but perfect doesn't exist.
No.
And so,
It sounds so logical when you say it.
but it happens. Do you feel that you want it to be perfect too?
Absolutely. I also have a perfectionist streak in a lot of things that I do, and that's its own challenge. But yeah, I just want to fit in, you know.
Is that difficult, or even more difficult with a second language?
Yeah.
Do you feel that fitting in is something that is also difficult, like acceptance that you're kind of?
Yeah, because I'm other, by nature, right? I will never be a native Spanish speaker. I know I will never have that proficiency. But at the same time, I still strive, for it. I study, and yeah, we kind of see what happens. I think every experience is different. On my way here, I was struggling to get this cappuccino because I ate lunch. It was really tiring for some reason because eating takes all my energy, and
You had to speak Spanish.
and I knew that I thought I was coming in here to speak Spanish to all of you, and I needed a little pick me up, and so yeah, I mean, even just on the walk over here, right? And then I was late. And so it's so it all builds up.
You guys mentioned native speakers. I think this is a huge thing in language learning, right? Who speaks English as a second language and would like to sound like a native speaker? Only you? Really? So you guys know what a native speaker is, right? A native speaker is somebody who was born in a country that speaks natively, right? So trying to be a native speaker is impossible.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen, right? So when you talk about language learning and you talk about pronunciation, a lot of people think it's about practice, and it is about practice, but really it's a physical thing, right? Pronunciation is about the muscles in your face, and the muscles in your face are built in a way because you used them when you were a kid. So the people who speak one language have muscle structure in one way, and then in other languages, they have muscle structure another way. So it is actually physically impossible to speak as a native speaker if you weren't trained as a native speaker when you were a kid, right? So I always find it amazing. We have a language school at Learning, and everyone comes in and everyone says, I want to sound like a native speaker. I want to, I'm not going to stop until I sound like a native speaker.
And back in the days, having an accent, a native accent or a Latin accent in our case, was seen as a bad image of you, as maybe the content will be trespassed by your accents, and it's nothing to do with that.
No, and quite honestly, in other people, I love accents. I love accents
In
in
other people.
English. It makes no sense, and I think that's
Yeah.
well, maybe why it's a syndrome, right? But yeah,
Again, no syndrome makes sense outside, right? But how do you feel about your own accent?
oh, I can't even speak in the accent that I grew up speaking in, because when I grew up in New Orleans, which we talk a little funny, and then I moved to California, where everyone speaks like they do on television, naturally, and it was like I stepped off of the bus, and all of a sudden, everyone knew that I was from the South part of the United States, which is not a part of this, United States that's admired very much. And I felt that, and someone actually told me that I don't present intelligently because of the way that I talk, and that I should work on that. And those were the words. You should work on that. And I did. I took it to heart, and I immediately realized that, or thought that, I had to do something about it, right? I had to change the way that I speak. And when I go home and visit my family now, my cousins make fun of me because now I don't talk like them. And when people ask, like, well, just talk in your normal accent. Like,
what's normal anymore? I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of sad in a way.
Well, how do you guys feel about your accents? Weird. It's conflicting. Accents are a part of our story, right? A lot of times we try to, like you said, I'm gonna try and change it a little bit. I grew up in England, and I had a British accent for the longest time, and then I moved to other places, and I had a lot of contact with Americans, and then I went back to Uruguay, and I had other people, and at one point I realized that I was struggling to keep the accent, And then at one point I said, you know what, I'm not British. I don't identify with British, really. So why am I continuing to do that? I should have an American accent. And then it was like, I don't want to be American either. And so at one point I sort of let go of it. And what I find when I speak to other people is that people find accents sexy.
Yeah.
Remember this. People like hearing they're like, oh, where are you from? And it sparks really nice conversations a lot of times. But we feel really self-conscious. Do you feel self-conscious about your accent too?
Yeah, a little bit. Nowadays, I relax myself a little bit. And there is a phrase that I love that it says, respect people with accents, because it means that they know another language.
Yeah.
And this is a lot. And takes a lot of years to have a good pronunciation and a good knowledge of the language. So that phrase for me was like something that before and after for me. It was, okay, it's true. This and having access with other people that maybe, I don't know, raised in countries that they have English as a second language, and they still have other accents. And it's fine. And it's fine. And it tells a lot about yourself and your culture. And we have to honor our culture as well. So,
Beautifully said.
yeah.
A round of applause. All right, well, I'm going to kick you out, and I'm going to bring other people to see if they think the same thing. Is that okay with you?
That's okay
Yes?
with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, you want to come in? Do you want to sit down? Leandro, do you want to? So,
Hola.
you speak Spanish?
Un poquito.
Un poquito. Do you speak another language?
Ich kann Alemande, Deutsch. Ich kann sehr gut Deutsch mit meiner Freundin Leandro.
Ja,
Sprechen
klar.
Sie Deutsch?
Ich kann ein bisschen.
Herr Melendez.
Herr Tomlinson, ja,
Yes.
bitte.
Ganz gut.
Alles gut.
What do you think about
Deutsch?
their accents
Vielleicht
in
Deutsch?
German?
Ja?
Good.
Vielleicht ganz gut. Genau. Just say genau. It's like claro. Claro. Sí, claro.
Claro.
Genau.
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 We're good.
So, what emotions do you associate with language learning? You said you speak German. When did you start learning English?
Oh boy. I had the luck that my family, when I was kind of young, 10 years old, my dad did conferences when I was a kid. So another story. So
We'll look into that in therapy afterwards. Right?
good point. Anyway, we used to travel to the States, and I was like 8 years old, something like that. And I remember like McDonald's, like, can I have the white thing with milk? Milkshake. And I was like, a milk that you shake? Oh my God. Those are kind of like my first memories, like picking up on the language and trying. And then my parents buying Disney movies without dubbing. It was just subtitles and under the sea. Under the sea. So
That's how you
It's a
learned
good
it.
Kinda, yeah.
That's a very
What
good-
emotions do you associate with language learning? For you, you're mentioning this situation. It sounds like a nice situation, like a situation of curiosity, or
I enjoy it a lot, especially I was a weird geek on etymologies. So, oh, this word and Greek is this and that and Latin here. And then I started to put together, I learned English. And then moving into German, I'm like, so many words sound a little bit like English.
you learned English
Ah.
as an adult, German as an adult.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. The last 6-7 years I've been learning, trying to pick it up. But it's something exciting because, as well, for me, was, traffic in Mexico City can be very interesting. So you gotta find ways to entertain yourself. And I found these CDs, you can tell how old this is, which, welcome to Pimsleur One, Portuguese lessons, blah, blah, blah. And then I picked up on Italian. So I was kind of like curious here and there. I like it because it gives you another understanding of how the minds of others work, because language molds them, their being, their way of thinking. And it's interesting when you contrast. And I got a very funny experience in Austria, because in Germany, there's a potato, Kartoffel.
Mm.
But in Austria, for some reason, they say Erdapfel, pomme de terre. And I'm like the French?
Mhm.
Huh? What is the, and then it gets interesting because you connect like, oh, there was some French influence here, and there was
In Espanol, apple of the earth.
yeah, manzana de
Erde-
tierra. That's
yeah.
how you say,
Apple
Papa.
of the earth.
Patata.
Earth and earth apple.
Kind
Wow.
of makes sense, right? But
Yeah, of course. But
But would you eat an apple if it's on the ground?
Underground.
It should be on the tree. Like, no, it just doesn't make sense. The Austrians are weird.
but do you speak German now? You learned German as a kid.
Yeah, in the school. Actually, it started with my maternal grandfather would still speak when he was very angry, and the little grandkids were running around the farm, and he was a second generation immigrant. So I'm a fourth generation from that. So my aunts, my mom, none of them speak German. But my grandfather still spoke German, and he would yell at us, "Heraus! Ah!" You know, he would tell us, he would just tell, and we have no
You don't
idea what it
need,
means.
there were no actual words. It was just
There was, yes, exactly. But they were like slang or things that he remembered and grew up with, and then it gets, diluted. And now, so we had no idea what those things meant. It was grandpa's not happy
heavy.
with us.
This is not good.
Yeah. So the first feelings about learning that language for me were, I want to understand why my grandfather is so mad at me. That's not good. But it was,
and
was,
how mad is he? What
Yeah,
are the words?
exactly.
what exactly are you?
On a
And then-
scale from 1 to 10.
So my brother in school decided he would take German, and I was kind of following my big brother's footsteps and taking German. And then, of course, we started to be able to talk back to my grandfather. And he was very he was like, my own children don't even speak German, and now my grandsons are speaking. So I had a very, very positive reinforcement of that. And so I kept up with German all the way through college. And so conversational German, excuse me, and you asked about like the first language-based sort of imposter syndrome. And it was it may back up for a second, like one of the original interpretations of the imposter phenomenon was that you don't believe your success.
Yeah.
Like the women in the 1970s were doctors, achieved a PhD, they had achieved a level of amazing success. But if you ask them, they're like, no, they were downplaying that, but you'd achieved something great. And so I just did the German thing because my brother did it, and okay, I'm speaking German, whatever, and this is great. And I got all the way into my second year in college after like 6 years of German, and I got invited to the beer garden with my professor and had this totally fluent conversation. And here's
You made it.
Here's this person, and he just turns to me and goes, "Your German is very good." And I was like, I instantly was like,
Is it?
do I deserve it? No way. Like instantly was like, no way. So I had done well at learning pronunciation and things, but I didn't believe it. I haven't kept up with it, but at that point I was like, I didn't believe I had done well.
You're just trying to be kind to me, right?
That's what a lot of people say.
They were being polite, but he wasn't.
But the genesis of imposter syndrome is also in the construction of my identity, right? Like not just in language, but in general. So it's always really useful to try and find kind mirrors, like people who sort of reflect back at you and say, hey, you did a great job. That was really good.
Yeah.
Because it would be great if we could do that on our own. That would be the healthiest thing, but we're not really brought up for that.
But I would say that's also a double-edged sword.
Okay.
Because I had this situation where I knew that my English was not awful, but I wanted to improve. And I had this girlfriend when we were dating. We dated for a year, and then my brother visits because he also speaks very good English. And he's like, why are you saying this way? And I'm like, is that wrong? Yeah. And you say it a lot. And I'm like, and I turned to my girlfriend and like, why haven't you told me? Because you sound cute. And I'm like,
that happens with
Speaking of
kids.
accents,
Yeah, that happens
there's the
with
cute
kids.
accent.
Yeah. Well, because there is cuteness and then there is not cuteness.
That's true.
no, well, it was cute for her, but I was
But not
saying
for
that
you.
in public
Yeah.
and saying things like spreadsheet that then I heard that you're pronouncing it weird. You're saying something else like, well, like
There is a
spread
concept.
something. And
Spread
I'm like,
something.
am I
Spread
saying-
A shit spreader, yeah.
well,
Yeah.
typical.
That's
we need to believe that.
That's a farming implement.
All right, but
That's
there's a
for the
concept.
cows.
There's a concept in language which is intelligibility.
Yes.
Okay, so there's one thing that is for you to have an accent that sounds cute or sexy or whatever, and then there's another thing when people don't understand what you're saying. And a lot of times people think that this is the discussion, like, oh, well, if you accept your accent, then you're accepting that you're not going to speak well. That's not what we're talking about. We're obviously always talking about being the best we can, because that's, if we can, then we're just going to try and get there. But there's a concept in intelligibility, and when you have people around you asking people to correct you when other people won't understand what you're saying is important. Yeah. But people have different relationships with mistakes and making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Like maybe for somebody it's not a big issue, and then for other people it's like, Daryl was saying today, I'm a perfectionist. I don't want to make mistakes
in the middle of a conversation, a couple mistakes, and suddenly, wow, do I even know what I'm getting a little lost, and your confidence goes away. Slightly different than like before you went to lunch in conversation. Or you had a marvelous lunch and the language did great, but in your mind, your identity, I'm still not very good at this. When actually the majority of people are like, you're actually great at this. Wow. I think I want to add one more thing.
We'll let you.
Is that the imposter syndrome plays itself out in my experience and actually talking to other people. It's a dynamic. It requires an other to to be fulfilled. Being insecure or not confident on your own is a natural part of human existence and being an emotional being. When you start experiencing the dynamic, which may be imbued with an expectation of a certain achievement, you may have achieved it and you don't think you did very well or whatever. And then I think it becomes almost a pathology even if you are not a perfectionist, but you could be great at something and you just never integrate that you're actually really great at it.
We have
software testers could be great testers and
they don't think they are.
They don't think they are. And they may be exposed to other people who don't like testing and they translate that, oh, you don't like me. You don't like my identity as a tester.
Yeah.
No. You're great at testing. That person just doesn't like you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different thing. But
it's true that it requires two. Do you remember, do you give conferences in English too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember the moment that you decided that you were going to do it in English?
No, I didn't decide it. I was just like, your turn.
Good luck.
Oh, okay. Hello. But I don't know. It's a matter of, on one hand, if you feel comfortable, like speaking in another language, I would highly recommend to not to feel it has to be perfect. I have to kind of have the perfect pronunciation or the right accent, or I should not be speaking like this, or like not imitating. Or when you get nervous, as long as you transmit the message, you're being able to communicate. I had some coworkers that really didn't have the best English, but they were working in total English spoken environments. That didn't stop them. And they were really good testers, and they didn't let that, like, there were some words that we were like, we had the rule. Tell them when they're saying something wrong, weird, or out of context, because that's very easy as well when you don't have the right pronunciations. And that happened to me in that conference. Fortunately, I had already been working a few years in the US and interacting with people in English. So it didn't feel that weird. Probably was more the stage fright and being nervous up there. But, and I still did horrible mistakes being on stage that first time. And I said very weird things, verb conjugations and blah.
But that first time that somebody sent you, was it something, did somebody send you to do it and say, hey, you can do it, go do it?
There was an open spot and like, yeah, you have presented in Spanish. Come on, yeah, go. And I'm like, okay.
Having somebody believe in you is an essential part of also building the confidence, right? Like somebody says, well, I think you could do it. You can totally do it. And then you go in and you make mistakes, right? So with imposter syndrome in general, it is good. But today, when we were trying to imagine that first situation when we were feeling this, right? It's a good practice to try and think of who else was around you, because a lot of times it is a dynamic, like you said. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't in a conference, but when I started to get the imposter syndrome were the first times that I went to the US for a project. And I had an addiction with buffalo sauce. And I went to these restaurants where you buy wings. And I was, can you give me some buffalo wings? Because in Spanish, it's buffalo wings.
Buffalo.
Buffalo. And I felt weird because often they were like, excuse me?
Yeah.
What do you want?
Yeah.
Buffalo wings. What? And I was like, what's? I didn't even know what I was doing wrong.
Yeah.
Until after several conversations with this girlfriend, she's like, oh, well, you told me this day it's buffalo, not buffalo. Oh, damn. I was feeling so bad because I'm like, don't I speak English well? What is going on? I was starting the skills. And it was just like a small misunderstanding.
It's just one, right? Which is, I think, what is also important to try and say, okay, it was just one thing. It was one mistake. It's not everything. I don't suck. I don't suck as a person. No, it's just that thing that I did wrong. Yeah. In English and in whatever else.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can we get a round of applause? Yeah, no?
Gracias. Danke.
Dankeschön.
Dankeschön.
Bis bald.
Roger, do you want to come on? How many minutes do I have? Do you want to come? Yes.
The great Arcadio.
I am the representative that those that raise their hand halfway.
How do I speak English? Well,
second
when you talk about when we were talking about emotions associated to learning language or speaking a language, like now, yeah. Like I invite Arcadio to sit down, and Arcadio is like, "Oh shit."
Yes.
How do you feel?
You proposed me that a few minutes ago, and I hesitate a lot, maybe for my impostor syndrome, but I accepted for to prove myself that I can do it, even knowing that my English is not good, but maybe I still get the message across and about the feeling. Without a doubt, it provokes the feeling that were mentioned before, the anxiety, the insecurity, maybe frustration.
Maybe.
Why I am Cuban, and I never thought that I would leave the country, so I never gave much importance to the language.
English,
My fault. And once in Uruguay, I how is that face reality.
Yeah.
And while I looking for a job, I miss many opportunities because I didn't have good English skills, and this is the frustration, the anxiety, the insecurity. And it was in a situation that I leave my country and I need that security, and the English is a word that I can break. And then I start to studying, and I feel that I improve a lot, but I really always feel that it's not enough. And
That's it.
I don't know what you want to talk about. So.
But this is what's interesting, right? Is that feeling that you're all listening right now. I'm sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot, but we're all listening and we're thinking, he's doing a great job. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But at the same time, always internally, there's like that inner, who was it? The inner saboteur, right? That's saying, you're not doing good enough. I want to tell you something. The reason why I wanted you to come up also is because Arcadio was a student in our school. And there was always an internal joke between the teachers that Arcadio was like the best student ever, no? And the thing was, every teacher deserves a student like Arcadio. That was the...
yes, because I don't, how is pena?
You're not embarrassed.
Yes, embarrassed to speak and to try to get the message across, but I have a mistake,
But that's the thing, you know? Do you know the concept of faking it till you make it? Yeah, fake it till you make it. So I'm just going to stand here and I'm going to pretend like I kick ass, and then you kick ass. And a lot of times when you doubt yourself, today we were talking about confidence, right? And about not being embarrassed about other people seeing you and believing in you, right? It's just a question of mustering up the energy to be able to do it. When we were talking about frustration, anxiety, and I talked to you earlier, and I asked you, how do you feel when you have to give a presentation in English? And I thought your take was different.
Yeah, in my case, when I have to speak in English, I usually have less problems than speaking in Spanish, because I know that people know that I'm speaking in English, that it's not my native language. So I know that I can make mistakes, I can get stuck. But when I speak in Spanish, I always try to come up with the correct, the special word that I want to properly express myself in that language. I stuck myself all the time. So that's why I usually are more, and I think it's also like a behavioral thing. Like when you start speaking on another language, you change your behavior. You kind of have this model that to speak properly in this language, you have to behave in this way or that way. So I think that changes too. And for my instance or my case, I feel more relaxed when I speak in English or do a presentation in English than doing it in Spanish.
You know, there is actually a construction of another personality when you speak another language. It's like you start constructing another personality. And so I thought what you said was so interesting, because there is a freedom in not having to be the person that you are when you speak Spanish, right? Like you can be somebody else slightly different, not complete. If it's too different, then I think it's another conversation. But there is a freedom to be a more chill Roger, because it doesn't have to be perfect, and the perfectionism doesn't necessarily sink in when you're speaking the other language. Do you feel that it changes when you're depending on the other person? Today, Mark was saying that it's a dynamic and it depends on the other person. Do you feel a little bit more insecure depending on who's on the other side and who you're talking to?
Yeah, totally. I mean, for my experience, I mean, when I started speaking English publicly, I usually spoke in English with people that weren't English speaking natively either. So, but after that, several years after that, I went to the US and started speaking in English. And it was, okay, I don't know how to say this, or I get stuck with this. And usually people in the United States, or the people that I got to meet, were really open. You speak really, really good English, and I speak Spanish a lot worse than you, so go ahead and go on, So, but there's sometimes that you feel like the people is judging you, like they are like in this stance and waiting you for speak English in the proper way, or they start like not correcting you, because I really like when people correct me in English because I learn. But when they are kind of reluctant of your point of view due to the way that you are expressing it, like that's when I get more nervous or start like closing myself and not expressing
because you feel like you're not conveying like all your professional self, let's say, in the language. Do you feel that too?
Yes, I had the opportunity to work in English project. That was a little short one, but was very important, and have that you say that in that project I was a team leader. That was a very a challenge, because in the internal team, yes, I felt confident, and I did maybe more free, feel more free to make mistake and that. But when was with the meeting with the client or with the other part of the project, that cost me a lot. I had the support of the team, but in that project, for example, I say, no, I don't want to.
You didn't feel confident enough to be able to do it?
Because maybe as a tester, yes, I report, I say what is my job, what is the bugs, and report. But as a leader, you have to
it's more high stakes.
Manage different scene, people, and I'm confident in that role. And I'm outside, no, but other people, but was a very good experience, because show me that I can do it, and that demonstrate me that is a long way, but the best way for me is that the necessity to use it to
get out there. A lot of times when in our school, we have people who go through all the levels, right? They get to C1 and they take the test, and you talk to them and they're fine, and then they don't participate in meetings, right? They don't participate because they don't want to make mistakes. And I think that a lot of times it is a question of confidence, but it's a question of other people on the team saying, hey, like, it's fine, we've got your back, obviously. So when you do get imposter syndrome in general, it is good because we are with others, right? Like, it would be wonderful if we could get our, all our confidence and validation from ourselves. We were talking about this today, but we mainly get it a lot from other people and from other people who support us, right? So when we do not feel confident or when we feel insecure, it is always good to try and talk to somebody else who can help you sort of build up the confidence. And also, something that's really important in language learning is that 2/3 of people that speak English as a second language. Yeah. So the probability of speaking to somebody in English, you're probably going to do it with somebody who doesn't speak English as a first language. They're probably going to be in the same situation as you, because it's not really American or British anymore. It's a language, it's a tool to communicate, it's ours. And so, you know, putting in, like you said, owning your accent, honoring the story is actually a really important part of being able to use the language as a tool, right? A lot of people don't see that, but it helps you when you start seeing also other people. Have you ever been inspired by somebody who spoke English as a second language and thought, hey, if they can do it, I can do it? Has that happened to you?
No, I think not. I mean, I think that for myself, like a lot of, I'm very into movies and TV shows, and almost all the time they are in English and you have the subtitles. So I think that seeing that and being that much into that helped me try to value the language, to want to learn it and get it better. Because in translations, several times you lose things. But I haven't faced that kind of scenario that you mentioned about, okay, if someone can speak English, I can. That's not the case for me, at least.
Not just the speaking, but being able to get up on a stage. Like today, we had a panel, and Ale, for example, was presenting. And I think this is a really important act of leadership. This is like, you know, when you go on a date and like the first time you take your clothes off, it's kind of like, okay, well, this is what there is, and that's it. No? And I think with languages, it's the same. Like once you do it, then afterwards it's like, it's okay. Now everybody knows that this is how I speak, and it's fine, right? There is an acceptance of what we are. And I think that this is something that's really, really important in language learning, but in general, with imposter syndrome in general. Are we on time? Yes.
It's the naked truth.
It's the naked
our
truth. Is
Last
that it?
7 minutes, but I don't want to live with that feeling, that frustration, anxiety, and insecurity, because 5 minutes. While I have improving, I have feel too that I'm become a better professional and with more confidence and security, so to face different challenge, and in that part is a good feeling too, no? Not only anxiety, it's part to the process, the anxiety, and
It's part of life
help you.
that sometimes it's anxious and sometimes it feels good, like, and that it
Yes,
changes. Yes,
Okay.
but and that it changes in a really short period of time. That like 5 minutes ago you were feeling anxious, and now you're feeling like, yes, I did it. No, and that's part of being human, and it's fine. And that's part of what we have to accept. I think it's really funny sometimes when people talk about language learning as if it's something that's different to being human. It's just like a part, it's so human that it involves all of these things. And so a lot of times when we talk about language learning, we forget that there are emotions that are tied to that, and it's essential that we address them, and we, you know, and that we accept them. Does anybody have a question that you, because we have like 3 minutes left. It has to be a quick question, or a story. The people who, when we asked at the beginning if you spoke English, and you said, if I ask now who speaks English, would you raise your hand or no? No. What qualifies as speaking a language? Like, when would you raise your hand and when would you not?
I think that Daryl mentioned this pretty well. At least for me, is being able to express yourself and feel that someone is understanding what you are trying to communicate.
No, in my case, I never felt that before. I am in the process, and no, for the moment, I know that is.
You won't raise your hand?
Halfway, only halfway.
Being able to, I think, accept also the process that we're in, and that it's a long process. Learning a language takes a long time, and time goes by, and it doesn't matter what you do, time is going to go by anyway. So a lot of people say, no, learning a language takes too long. That's it. That time is going to go by anyway. So the 5 years are going to go by. So the question is, at the end of the 5 years, will you speak English or not? Or will you speak Spanish or not? Yeah. It's sort of accepting that sometimes those things take time. I think we're at a time when it's difficult for us to do that. We just want like a pill, you know? A lot of people come to us and they're like, well, yeah, no, without any effort, we don't want to go to class. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen yet. Do you guys use AI
Yes.
Yes.
related
Yes,
to
of course.
English? How do you feel that AI impacts your imposter syndrome? Does it?
Regarding the
English.
English or speaking,
Hmm.
for me, it's not that much a change. I have a impostor syndrome. I think that in English, I usually don't have a impostor syndrome. I do have a lot of impostor syndrome, but due to other reasons, not due to the language.
Not
problem.
language
Yeah.
learning. What I've seen this a lot lately. I see on LinkedIn, everyone's like super Shakespeare. And everyone has like these super posts. And what I find is that while it is a great tool to be able to help me, a lot of times there is when you get to the meeting, it's like, oh my God, like, how do I live up to this expectation? Because I'm not Shakespeare, you know, and you can sort of draw the the mustache or whatever, but it's still not going to be that. So also watch out when you're using AI. Obviously use it as a tool because it's an excellent learning tool, but be careful and be a little bit more acceptant of where you're actually at, because authenticity, I think, in the end always wins. And that is a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, for that challenge.